Welcome to Talking Stack, Martech Advisor's weekly news podcast. Join us as Martech experts David Robb, Anand Talker, Amit Varshney, and editor Chitra Iyer talk about the things that matter this week in Martech.
Welcome, listeners. We're talking the week of 8th to 12th October on the Talking Stack podcast. And today we are delighted to welcome our second guest, Scott Brinker, who needs no introduction as far as the MarTech world is concerned and far beyond. Scott, welcome to our show.
I'm excited to be here.
Great. And then we also have David Robb and Amit Varshney. Unfortunately, we are missing Anand today. So hopefully we'll catch up with him later. So Scott, we want to make the most of having you here with us today and catch up with all the excitement around the recently concluded MarTech conference at Boston, because that's where all the smartest and sharpest minds congregate to talk about what's happening with MarTech. So how about we just start with a quick retrospective thought from you on how it went. What are the new narratives you're hearing from the practitioners who were there, and how it sort of changed over the years that you run this show?
Wow, yeah, I mean, we could cover quite a bit there. I think the high-level takeaway for me was I felt like this conference, both the speakers who agreed to participate leading into this, but also the audience who showed up this time, represents a significant step up in the maturing of this industry. I mean, people in this marketing, technology, and operations role, a lot of them, have kind of been in that early adopter mode for many years. They're really sort of pioneering this function, pioneering what, these marketing stacks actually were, how they operated. Very often they were working a little bit underneath the radar of the official organizational structure. And I think what really amazed me about coming into the event this year and the people we talked with at the show was how many of them are like officially heads of marketing tech, marketing ops, working not at, some sort of, high tech company, but at like a mainstream brand, both on the consumer side and B2B. And that's pretty impressive. I think we can declare that this marketing ops and tech profession has emerged. I mean, you were there, David. What do you think?
Well, I thought it was a great conference. Always enjoyed it. You're right. The earlier days, it was feeling like everybody was kind of getting out of their cave and looking around and realizing, hey, there's other people like me. And I don't think the marketing technologists feel quite so isolated as they did, 4 or 5 years ago, and it was just a little elite group. But that raises the question: when do we get to a certification?
When you start looking about this process of really changing the way an organization's marketing capabilities are being shaped by marketing technology, and not just the tech pieces of this, but really the organizational capital around it, to me, that's the really hard stuff, and it feels like that's difficult to compartmentalize into a certification course and say, okay, you are a MarTech capabilities expert, but if you have another point of view, I'm all ears.
Is there a common core of knowledge that people need to have? I mean, that's kind of where the conference almost presumes, right? The only reason you have a conference is to share things that people can apply in their own lives. If it was all totally unique, why even have a conference other than, have an opportunity to hang out?
And I definitely think.
And Scott, if I may just add to that, is there a common core? And I think just again for the listeners, marketing professionals, and some of them may be considering leaning more towards the marketing tech. Is there a skill set that can be defined as a generic one across all marketing tech or marketing ops that people should really be leaning towards?
Yeah, so this is where things get a little complicated, because part of it comes down to the scale of the organization you're talking about, right? If it's going to be a company that's going to have one person who's not only having to figure out the strategic portion of what are we doing with marketing, tech, and ops, but they're also going to be, chief cook and bottle washer. Then that is a different kind of personality than if you say, look at an organization of the size of LogMeIn, where, yeah, Justin might understand this tech very well, but his main skill set at this point is talent management and change management, and helping to really embrace the way marketing ops engages with the rest of the organization. And so you get into a skill set that, yeah, I mean, technical certifications are completely useless, on that side of it. And so that's why it's hard. I mean, you have this whole range of skills that marketing overall needs, and whether you're trying to compress that into one person or a team of 50 people, yeah, it makes a big difference. Yeah, we had Justin Schraff of LogMeIn, who heads up their marketing ops and tech. Amazing guy, and he gave a whole session talking about, okay, well, what does a team look like that does this in an organization of some scale, and how do you hire for it, and what are the different roles that make it up? I mean, as that information starts to get distributed, I feel like that is a much bigger step in the direction of professionalizing marketing ops and tech.
So really what we're saying is that marketers and marketing technologists can't be isolated anymore from each other or what each other does. Marketers can't afford to be ignorant about the MarTech piece of their job, and MarTech people can't, execute effectively without understanding what the fundamentals of marketing are.
Yeah, and actually, that's a good segue to a topic I know David and I have debated a bit on, this movement around what I call the democratization of marketing technology, that, these roles of citizen developers and citizen integrators and citizen data analysts, that the tools that are now available allow really non-specialist marketers to be able to, using like a no-code environment, like build these little apps, whether they're like workflow apps inside their organization or possibly even customer-facing apps. They can use tools like Looker and Tableau to actually do some pretty savvy analysis on all the data that they're getting access to. And so I think that's, to your point here about, these capabilities that 5 years ago we used to think were purely in the domain of IT. You needed the IT enterprise architect to come in and do that. Over the past 5 years, we've seen this migration of it into marketing operations and technology. So a team that's rooted in the marketing department, but still has generally pretty strong technical credentials, to now, more of these tools giving a lot of that power to marketers who aren't technologists by background.
Well, my position is that the term citizen developer is an insult to both citizens and to developers, right?
Why do you say that?
I say that because, well, there's a lot more to being a citizen than developing just marketing technology, and there's a lot to being a developer that is not just about kind of knowing what you're doing. I think that there's a discipline, and for all that we pick on IT departments for being slow and unresponsive and all the rest. The problem that you have if you don't is the exact problem they've always had with shadow IT. Oh, I'm just going to do it in Excel. I can do a lot in Excel, but if I don't have the rigor behind to test things properly and make sure they're not security bugs, for example, which happens very, very frequently in customer-facing systems. We won't mention the name of any companies. That's what happens when you don't have that kind of rigor involved.
I talked a bit about at MarTech this trade-off between centralization and decentralization, and you can look at that. This citizen developer sort of role is in many ways a bit like this, where in order for the decentralized citizen developer to be successful, it's really important that the platform on which they're developing have pretty strict rules about, okay, here's the sandbox, and you can do all sorts of creative stuff inside the sandbox, but all the sharp edges have cork on them so that you're not going to go running into something and spill out customer data all over the net.
So Would the balance of centralization and decentralization apply to assembling the right stack as well? When marketers are, assembling the best stack possible, who should be making the buying decisions about MarTech? Should it be MarTech and IT specialist, or should it be this democratized citizen marketer who also understands tech now?
I love this topic. All right, so this is my favorite topic in the world. It really is. So here's the thing, is not all marketing technology is created equal. And I think we have to look at this through a lens of saying, I mean, one way of looking at it is, the Gartner, pace layering, diagram. But this idea that, listen, if you're selecting your CDP, your core system, this is going to be a foundational system that orchestrates everything happening through, the data foundations of your marketing organization. Yeah, you don't want basically everyone in each sub-department of marketing to get their own CDP. It defeats the whole purpose. But, on the other end of the spectrum, when you've got things like, if someone's going to make an infographic, and they want to use some cool tool like Canva, to create that infographic, is this something the marketing ops and tech team really wants to control? No, you can't use Canva. We've got this. You can only do it with Adobe Cloud over here. To me, one of the whole things that's, and so that's the other end of the spectrum, but you start to go, between the middle, there's a lot of interesting points, like, events, right? Like if a team within marketing for a particular region is going to go and run an event, does it matter if they're going to use Swoogo or if they're going to use Eventbrite? You could say, well, we certainly want it to be common data. We want to connect it to, to the appropriate customer records. We don't want to duplicate that. But actually, thanks to things like CDPs and these, iPaaS solutions, everything from Zapier on up, actually, you can connect the data. So whichever, if you have, your field marketing team using Eventbrite, for certain kinds of seminars, and then your customer conference team wants to use Swoogo, for their larger event. Again, does the marketing ops and tech team really want to say, oh, no, that's too many duplicate MarTech? I just don't think it matters.
It doesn't matter as long as you say, everything connects to everything else, although there is a cost to connecting things. So
it's getting lower, thanks to CDPs.
It's getting lower, absolutely, thanks to CDPs, and you've been a huge supporter of the CDP concept, so we appreciate that. Part of the issue is, should marketers be even spending their time, evaluating technology? Really, don't they have a day job? They shouldn't be. They
Existential question.
Existential question. What should marketers really be doing? Maybe it is presumably part of their day job. But complexity adds cost, and look, at the end of the day, you and I both know, we all know that there's not a one or the other answer. It's a balance. And, as you say, there are core systems that really need to be very rigorously sourced, and there are peripheral systems, and you've said this, Scott, many more times than I have, that's where you do your experimentation. So you have to recognize, and we all have to recognize, that there is that balance. Then that simply raises the next question of, okay, how do we decide where the balance is? What are the criteria? Decide what's a core system, what's not a core system? Where should the marketing technology department get involved and sort of lay down the law, and where should they just sort of say, hey, do whatever you want as long as it doesn't cause damages? That's really the next level of question you have to answer.
I think the way, a little tongue-in-cheek earlier, you were saying, okay, should this be their job, or do you really want them spending their time doing this? I think that actually very literally does become the heuristic by which you want to make those decisions. That basically the only time you want someone on the edge of the organization investing time in getting some new kind of MarTech tool is basically if the outcomes they believe they're in a position to get from using that tool is significantly greater than whatever baseline set of capabilities already exist inside the organization. And I think you should hold people accountable for this, right? At the end of the day, it's the marketer's responsibility to drive outcomes, with new business, with growth in customer relationship. And if they want to leverage new tools and technologies, achieving that, great. But what you don't get to do is buy a bunch of technology, not get the outcomes, and then say, oh, well, yeah, we tried. you have to be accountable.
Another bit of news that caught our eye is about Adobe announcing some pretty significant Magento integrations recently. So David raised this point about what does this say about how easy or difficult or meaningful or meaningless integrations, quote unquote, are today.
Adobe closed on Magento in June. They announced it in May, closed in June. 4 months later, they're announcing integrations. That would have been impossible with some of the older technologies that we're used to. It's actually kind of astonishing to move that quickly, and some pretty good integrations, as Neri can tell you, taking the Sensei AI and putting it inside and so on. So I think that's really kind of a testimony to what a properly designed architecture lets you do in terms of connecting things in APIs and microservices. And again, very much Scott's song here, but I'll sing it because he's been singing my song all day. And we see a lot of announcements about integrations. There was one about Deus having a Shopify integration in Sitecore, actually buying Style Labs with also integration. There was one about SAP doing some things with e-commerce, and we've always had people talk about alliances. That's a standard thing, and you read that press release and your eyes kind of glaze over because what does it mean? But we're now seeing some of these integrations that are really doing some pretty impressive things that are more than just a sort of a go-to-market alliance. It's really some deep technical connection. So the question is, does this really change, back to the point about designing for change? Does it change the calculus? Because we always used to say, integration is hard, and you want to avoid integration. That's why you buy suites and stuff. And you could argue that the fact that people still make noise about announcing these integrations and putting work into making these integrations happen, just take, Zaya Shopify just as an example, it can't be too easy. If it was really easy, they wouldn't bother to announce it, right? They would just have a connector and be done with it, and it wouldn't even be worth talking about. So either integration's gotten a lot easier. Well, I think integration has definitely got a lot easier. But has integration gotten so easy that it's unremarkable, or is it still really hard and we still have to pay some attention?
And I think that leads us to wonder what impact it may have on the future of MarTech landscape. Will there be more standalone solutions, and will these all-in-one suites become irrelevant, or will we have a few really large players who acquire all the specialists and do everything, leaving no room for the standalones anymore?
It's interesting. I'm a big, strong believer in this idea of tentpole systems, of like major platforms. And I think you have half a dozen companies now that have really stood away from the pack as saying, okay, we will be the center of gravity around which you then build your marketing stack, and you use our platform as a coordination mechanism to orchestrate this stuff. And I think there's half a dozen that are really the well-known companies today, and maybe you could argue there's a few other dozen that are the next generation contenders, a number coming from the CDP space, who have a shot at that too. But I think the very nature of these systems becoming more open and designed to orchestrate, interactions from a bunch of different point solutions actually makes the economics of point solutions a lot more attractive, right? I mean, if I can take something, I wanted some specialized thing for running this kind of an event, with an augmented reality app for when people come, and actually show up at the door. If I can sort of drag and drop that stuff and give it a credit card and sign it up, and it syncs the data with my core systems, I'm able to pull the, right content assets from my digital asset management system. And the stuff generally just is pretty quick and easy to stand up. Yeah, I think you're going to see an explosion of those. And it doesn't even become just these like horizontal, oh, well, who's going to have the very best augmented reality event app? It starts to become much more business specific, vertical market specific, like, oh, okay, well, actually, if I've got my augmented reality event app because I'm, running, like furniture related events or home show events or things like that, that becomes this whole little specialist, niche. And so I think you'll see an explosion of those kinds of technologies, even while the common centralized platforms, really start to look like a truly consolidated market. There's a difference between complicated and complex, and the easiest way of thinking about that in my mind is complicated is, okay, I've got like a Ferrari is a very complicated device, and if I go in there and I randomly start pulling wires around, and say, the thing's just going to break. When you talk about one very large system to orchestrate everything, I think it starts to look like that. It becomes a really complicated thing. It starts to weigh down underneath its own weight. Any change here has a dependency over there. People can't change these things quickly. They can't adapt to new things quickly. This is actually the legacy IT world we came from, from generation 1.0 CRM systems. Versus complex is a little bit different. This is like, okay, I've got a bunch of much smaller pieces, and any one of these smaller pieces actually has a little bit more simplicity to it. And in that simplicity is a certain amount of elegance. It can be really easy to use for that particular function. The complexity becomes, okay, well, now I've got a bunch of these different little pieces, and while they're each easy on their own, the way in which they get orchestrated and coordinated together is complexity, and so this is a much more organic ecosystem, view of it. And I'm not saying that one is good and one is bad. They're just very different trade-offs. But I would make the argument that in a world where things are changing very quickly, the complex system can adapt much more quickly than the complicated one can.
The question that I ask myself a lot is back to the notion of the tentpole systems, which again, I agree. But is there one? Are they all sort of competing to be the one tent pole that rules them all? Or will we have multiple? I have my CRM tent pole over here, my marketing tent pole over here, my customer service tent pole over there, my logistics and manufacturing and human resource tent poles. Are there multiple tent poles in an organization, or is there really only room for one?
So David, considering data is central to marketing today, could the CDP or any customer data management platform, perhaps a CDP, be the central tentpole for holding up the whole show?
When I think of a tentpole, at least in today's world, I think of a Salesforce system or a marketing automation system. Those are the people who would position themselves as the tentpole, and those are the guys who kind of own that territory now, anyhow, right? So they're the incumbents who need to be dislodged if you want to be a tentpole. And those are systems that, yes, they manage data, but they do a lot more than just hold it. They actually have functionalities that you apply. They do run interactions. They do a bunch of stuff. I think that there will be multiple large, complicated, in Scott's terminology, systems for things like running a call center, running a website, running marketing automation, and they'll share customer data. That'll be the connective tissue. And hopefully there'll be one customer data repository, truly a customer data platform. But I don't see the CDP as the tent pole itself. I just see it as the cables that are connecting the tent poles to each other and to all the things that rest on the tent poles. Let's go to the circus.
Yeah, I could be the popcorn vendor in this metaphor.
Yeah, I'll be the clown. Yeah.
Which is where all the money is anyways. It's in the concession stand.
Anyway, we're inviting analogies on the talking stack, so anybody else has a better visual, we're happy to hear it. And the prize is what? Free passes to your next conference, Scott?
Only if I can get David to dress up as Benjamin Franklin.
Hey, careful what you wish.
Hey.
I'm thinking of the AR app.
I'm sure there's a backstory to that. Okay,
the next episode of Talking Stack, I'll let him explain.
Gotta leave something to the imagination of our listeners, but in case we don't hang in too long, so Scott, come back soon. And on that note, we'll just say goodbye. Thank
you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. See you next week with our take on the big news in the MarTech world. Log into martechadvisor.com for more expert commentary on all things MarTech.